Our guest panelists today are Mr. Paul Schmitz, who is Safety Director with Wayne Transports, Inc. out of Minnesota, and Leslie Smith, who is Paul's Client Success Representative here on our end at Infinity. This is one of a series of webinars that we've done focusing on orientation. Came about because we had a lot of client response wanting to set up orientation that worked around social distancing guidelines so that they were able to keep their home office safe, keep their drivers safe, keep their new recruits safe. Something else we also realized as we were putting this webinar together is on previous webinars, we have talked about our Client Success Department, our CSRs, and we talked about them very broadly. We did not go into much detail about what we do. And Leslie and Paul have a fantastic working relationship together, so it seemed like a natural and good idea to get them on the call together so they can talk about how they work to make this happen. Because our client success team is unique to our organization. We don't believe in a faceless customer service experience. We don't believe good customer service is where you're calling a stranger, that you have to potentially talk to a stranger every time that you call in and have to start over your conversations. We believe that if we can service your account correctly, that you'll stay with us forever. And this will be an opportunity to showcase how that works and how it can work very, very successfully. So Paul, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, fantastic. Craig, thank you so much for having me here. I'm so glad that Leslie's on the call. She's going to definitely help provide me some support. This is the first webinar I've done. But a little bit about myself. Fantastic. I'm a 20-year Air Force veteran, and my primary background has been in technology, computer programs, working in safety, and training and developing training courses. So I come by a lot of this in a fairly natural manner, and I've got the experience. I do want to premise this by saying that you don't have to have these backgrounds to be able to do what we've accomplished here with Infinity and Vertical Alliance. Focusing on the last 10 years of what I've done is been involved in transportation. First 7 years were with my first company where I learned a lot. Started out in a CSA compliance role, learning about CSA 2010, and then took on their computers and telematics systems, deployed ELDs early on, probably about 9 years ago, and then very quickly realized that they didn't have a training program within there. Started working more on their safety management programs and a lot of things that were essentially missing within their safety programs and compliance. One of the focuses in which brought me to Vertical Alliance Group years ago was the training program. Now, being a trainer myself and having an educational background in development, I saw that there was just an immediate need to get these guys and gals some information, to get them aware of what's going on out there and help them to be better at what they do. I started my relationship with Vertical Alliance. Actually, I believe my first one was 2012, I believe it was early 2012. I contacted them in 2011, made the final leap with ownership in 2012. So I've had a good relationship, and then most recently started with Wayne Transports. They hired me on as their safety director, and again noticed there wasn't a training program, and so that was my first focus, was to get the training started right away. That's when my relationship with Leslie started, was way back then. It seems like 2.5 years, but it also feels like I've known her pretty much most of my life with what we've gone through. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Wayne Transports is a 600 plus truck fleet. We have a lot of different loads that we haul, mostly fuels, petroleum products, asphalt. We do some chemicals, some food grade products, and we cover 9 terminals and pretty much touch almost every state in the country at one point or another, plus up into Canada. So we're spread out quite a bit.
Excellent, excellent. All right, Leslie, introduce yourself to us.
Okay, I'm Leslie Smith. I've been with Infinity for almost 3 years now. I've been working with Paul about 2.5 years now. I'm originally from Ohio. I have 3 boys. I'm a huge football fan, as all my clients know. I love the Buckeyes and the Bears, so that's just about it. And I came from the insurance industry before here.
The thing that popped out is that you guys have been working together for 2.5 years. I mean, there are probably people on this call today that have had 3 to 4 safety managers in that same time frame at their organization. and potentially, who knows how many anonymous customer service reps in other places that they've gone or services that they have used. So that longevity to me is very impressive. And I think it really allows you guys to have some depth of understanding and long-term planning of what Wayne has done successfully to get where they are now and what they can then do to continue that growth and success in the future. That is tremendous. Now, one thing I did want to point out on this orientation process, it's interesting, Paul, that you mentioned the 2 times that you have been to organizations, you walked in the door and there was no safety program. And I'm sure that that's something that other folks on this call can sympathize with. It's definitely a refrain that I hear from other organizations, that they have needs for safety training, and then by the time they walk in the door and they're gifted an empty file cabinet, that they then have to go and recreate whole cloth what's going on so that they can survive an audit and they can have a safe program and they can minimize accidents. And hopefully is occurring less and less as our industry matures more, but it is something I hear very frequently. So
it is. It's an unfortunate situation walking into that and looking at it, especially if they know the need for the education and the training and how important it is, to the driver force, as far as that engagement and that contact and keeping that flow going. But also from a legal standpoint, it's just huge. And I really didn't realize that until I had been well into my tenure with my last company and been involved in court cases. And that's when the ugly truth actually came out about how absolutely critical having a good training program in place and the record keeping to be able to validate that in a court situation.
Let me go ahead here to the next slide, since you talked a little bit about some of the information on this already. So what I did is I talked to Leslie and put together an infographic here of how your orientation process works, from the beginning to also additional follow-up items that you do in person, and then follow-up items that you have scheduled out farther into the pipeline. Now, I think most folks have this first half here on the left down pretty well, up to the drive test and the drug screening, but then the 30-day orientation follow-up and the 60-day orientation follow-up, I'm very excited to hear you talk about once we get to those, because that is something that is unconventional. That's not something that we encounter very often when we see orientation programs built out, even though it is something that does deliver higher results and higher retention of information. And actually, probably your insurance company, if they see this, they love this, because this is something they absolutely recommend that people do as they are coming along, that you do those follow-up items, because if you tell someone something one time, great. If you're expecting them to retain that then for the next 12 months without going back and revisiting that information, that's problematic. And anything that can be done to reinforce is awesome. This orientation piece here, what do you typically include in this bucket? I know this is your general company information, policies, procedures. What do you have them go through there?
Originally, we had what you had talked about was a very similar orientation online. Once we built the online courses, we said, here, you have to complete all these before you show up, which is very typical. I mean, several hours worth of video content, PDF content, acknowledging this, acknowledging that. And what I found when I was doing orientations, because I do all orientations, I meet all the drivers when they come through, is I would ask them, how did you like the orientation training? What was your feedback? And I asked just a lot of very critical questions. And over the course of time, I realized that because we were pushing so much information at them and requiring this, they were pushing themselves through it, and they weren't getting what we wanted them to get out of it. It was just checking a box.
Okay.
So I didn't want that box to just be checked. I felt that we were doing them a disservice on the company. So I looked at it a little more critical. I'm like, well, what can we do? What if we broke it up? What is that going to accomplish? And by breaking it up into our initial orientation and then spreading it out, it accomplished not only better retention and the driver's engagement, but it also accomplished getting them started on the process of doing continual training. So in answer to the question, orientation course, we generally start out, as you said, with the information background on the company, PDFs, and different slides that introduce them. We hit a lot of that in our face-to-face orientation as well. So we, need to have that in there. But we worked with Great West Casualty. I know that they're a big insurance company out there. They have provided us with some excellent videos, and they're available on Infinity, which is fantastic because of the partnership that's there.
Correct.
And we certainly appreciate that. Then we also go into a CSA Drive series. Now, what we do with these value-driven series from Great West and from the CSA series that you guys have and Hours of Service series is we don't throw the entire boat at them at once. We break it down into chunks that are important to us, and each company has to decide what is important. And what we do is we brought it down to about an hour and a half, 40 minutes of actual training. So what this does is it gets them in the door, gets them accustomed to using the training, but it doesn't overwhelm them. We add on top of that anything that's client specific, such as the FSMA training, or if they are going to be doing something for hazmat, then we run them through the hazmat general awareness 1 and 2 and get them certified for HM 126. So we cover all that before they get in. Now this creates a bit of a commitment to the program. It shows us a commitment level by tracking their progress, how they're getting it done, quickly they're getting done. We get notifications through the system. My training manager does, and my hiring manager, they all get the notifications that tells us, yep, they're on track. So when they show up, they already have all this under their belt and they're ready to roll. And then we move on with the next step. Actually, I love the way you've got this laid out. 30-day follow-up. So what we do with the 30 days, we bring them back into the training program. We let them know, say, hey, look, we're going to set you up with more orientation courses, more follow-up. It has to be completed within the first 30 days. And then we're going to also set you up with some more for the next 30 days. So everything, all orientation or training and all these videos have to be completed, by that 60th day. All in all, when I got here, we had about 7 or 8 hours worth of videos. The guys would sit in a room with a headset on and stare at a computer, and it was just painful to watch.
Ugh, yeah.
So what we did was we saved a ton of the driver's time, a ton of the driver's brain cells, and a pretty good chunk of change by adopting this type of orientation or onboarding process.
That's awesome. I want to point out a couple things that you brought up. First, feedback on the orientation process. I love how you solicit that from the people that you have going through the system, because that's critical. The drivers need to be able to respond towards how things are being presented with them. Are they getting it? Are they not? If they're not, what needs to be changed to be able to help with their retention of information? Because as you pointed out with that 7 to 8 hour video, how much are they going to retain from that? Is it going to be meaningful? Will it be useful? Will it make them safer on the road? I also love the fact that your training manager, your hiring manager are all involved in the reporting on participation. So this multiple departments, as it were, are participating in the orientation process. Now, when you were getting this initially set up, were there other departments that you worked with that pushed back on this?
I can't say that we had a specific hard pushback. Typically, your relationship between the safety department and your operations is, how do I put this nicely?
Are they on the call today?
Yeah, there may be some of them on the call. No, the relationship typically in transportation between operations and safety is generally a stressed one. We're not seen as helpers and as people who are trying to protect the company, and we're a hindrance to the operation so many times. So it's a mindset that has to go through and be changed. Did I run into opposition with other departments? Not directly. It was more along the lines of, we need our drivers, we need them now, what's taking so long? So we had to find a way to get them through this training, make it effective so that when they got their driver, they were ready to go. Anybody that's presented themselves as a challenge in that area, the tactic that I took was I would approach them and I would ask them, how do you want your driver to come to you? Do you want a driver just to sit in a seat and deliver the goods? Or do you want a driver that's prepared, that's not going to make mistakes and be on the side of the road or cause company money and embarrassment to you, and be fully prepared to do that job. You tell me which driver you want, and that's the driver I'll give you.
Gotcha. No, I know that on previous webinars and communications that we talk to from prospective groups and even existing clients that are doing ongoing training and trying to grapple with this orientation piece, they're trying to figure out how to get buy-in from other departments. And so I'm glad that they were able to hear that. I know that previously you and I had talked about that you were able to solicit their input, make it something that it's participatory for them so that they are joining you. It's their thing too. It's not just you inflicting your process onto them, that they're coming on board and they're an active participant. So
yeah, the biggest thing, as you said, and it also has to do with leadership. All right, when it comes to the other departments, primarily the only other department that I deal with that would have an issue would be operations, but you also have the lead managers and then the owners. Yeah, by getting them all in a room and then explaining the goals of the process and what you want to get your drivers to, where you want them to be in the end, and then soliciting their feedback and saying, hey, help me develop this program. And then they tell you what they feel is best, because a lot of these guys were previous drivers. So, I mean, they've got a different level of vision here. Yeah, and once they start talking about it, then they own it. And
yeah.
then next thing you know, it's their program just as much as yours. When it works, it's gorgeous. It's beautiful.
Was this second box, this FSMA, this client-specific training, the Samsara training, and the liquid asphalt training, those are just examples of things I know that you incorporate into orientation, but I don't think many people do. I think probably the only one on the list that really jumps out for most folks would be the ELD training. They've got their own specific flavor of ELD that they want their people to know about. But an orientation, they really can afford to dream bigger, especially now in the current ongoing health crisis that we're in. If there is client-specific information that somebody needs to know in terms of how to operate on their sites, or if they have specific rules about what your drivers can and cannot access when they're delivering now, or if they should just be doing drop and hook and heading off with the next load, that's a great opportunity now within orientation to make sure that drivers understand those things. And then with the liquid asphalt, with the FSMA training, obviously those are specific to the loads that you haul, but there are other people on this call that may also be hauling those same types of things that are probably holding off on incorporating that training into orientation until other things happen or potentially later in the process. And I just think that it's great to front load those things within orientation. It is not conventionally how we see orientation built. So I find that exciting, because that is powerful stuff. It's specific to your organization, specific to Wayne, and it's absolutely mission critical information that people need to know to be able to haul the loads that you guys have. So,
right, to bring some focus on that within the Infinity platform and the power of the relationship that I have with Leslie, we create several of our own videos. One thing that I've always been a proponent of is if you can bring the freshest content that's relevant to the driver, that they recognize, and get it out in front of them, they're going to eat it up. They're going to be a lot more engaged in something that they see, that they recognize, that fits what they are, rather than something that's just, oh, I got to watch another seatbelt video. This stuff, this client-specific stuff, is very important to get them ready. And, in working with Leslie, she's always encouraged me and, poked me, from time to time about getting this stuff, out there. Because I'll feed ideas to her. I say, well, what do you think about this? And I'm like, well, I got a client over here that kind of does something like that, and this and that and the other. I'm like, okay, so I'm on the right track. And so bouncing stuff off of her was really helpful to me, because she has such a broad knowledge, within the industry of different clients that do, certain things and their success rate at it. So, I mean, what an absolutely fantastic asset to have in your team. And then, of course, she facilitates, getting the stuff online as quickly as possible for us. The ELD, I actually do a lot of the videos myself, just so they get used to seeing my face, and I'm a friendlier face, not the safety director that's, carrying a hammer in my hand. So it helps. I really like our customized training that we put out too.
Excellent. Anything about that, Leslie, that you want to say? I know you do work with multiple groups. I know that Paul and Wayne are one of them, but having that background with multiple other clients, it is very easy then to share what works one place to help Wayne and other organizations. It's all about sharing the good stuff, what works, but also helping people with trying to avoid some of the pitfalls as well, I know.
Absolutely. And, just pushing that ongoing training monthly, as much as you can get them in the system, the more used to they are, and they'll continue to do it as well.
Excellent. All right. Now, one thing I did want to point out, this 30-day and the 60-day box, I am sure there's lots of people looking at this going, how do you get anybody to commit to all this? Because I know people struggle with orientation. They have their drivers that are coming in from organizations where I'm sure you've been told, well, we didn't do training, and it's your expectation of them, both for company drivers, but also owner-operators as well. I know owner-operators for many groups out there can be a sticking point because there is the challenge that they may pick up stakes and go move to another organization that doesn't have safety training or doesn't have some sort of requirement that they feel that they don't have to participate in. But I want to know, how do you get buy-in from your drivers? How do you get buy-in from your owner-operators?
Isn't that like the bazillion-dollar question out there?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, once we have your miracle answer, we're going to copy it and send it to the world.
I don't know if it's a miracle answer. I'm a sales guy at heart. I believe that I can sell ice water to Eskimos some days. The way I do it is basically I do it in the orientation portion itself. Obviously, most drivers realize that any trucking company they're going to go to, they're going to have to do some sort of an orientation training, right? So by minimizing what we hit them with up front, just hitting them with maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours max of this online training, it introduces them to the platform. So they get a little taste of it. So during orientation, either our face-to-face or our Zoom meetings, because with the COVID-19, we've been doing a lot of Zoom orientations at remote locations. So we go face-to-face Zoom meetings with doing our orientation. Each person of our team comes through. Anyway, so during the orientation, this is when we begin to focus on why the training is there. You get those questions. It's like, okay, yeah, I've been through this, been there, done that. Why do I have to do it? When you're able to talk to a driver and explain the background behind the why, I believe in answering or giving the why up front, because in almost every case, if you're able to give the why, then they understand it. If you just tell them to do it because that's what you do, they're going to buck it. They're going to come up with all kinds of reasons why they shouldn't do it instead of the reasons why. So typically in orientation, we talk about what the training does. What's the purpose of the training? It's not just to take up your time. It's not just to check a box. The training serves a purpose of awareness. And then we talk about the awareness game and how throughout their day, they do hundreds and hundreds of decisions. And all those decisions come from training that they've received or experienced. But so many times, it's easy to become complacent in what you do and lose that edge. This awareness training that we start with in orientation and build off of and continue on throughout their career with us helps to maintain that awareness level and keep them sharp. It's like taking a knife to a sharpening stone. You got to keep it sharp, otherwise it loses its edge and then it becomes ineffective.
Absolutely.
Then we start talking about the legal aspects of why training is so important. And we bring out case studies of the drivers and the managers and the owners were asked about the training programs. And can you show that the driver was trained in this specific area? When were they trained? Did they sign off on this training? There's so many aspects of the legal thing. And every case that I've been involved in has involved those questions, and failure on that side is almost always going to end up with a percentage of a verdict against you, always.
Mm-hmm.
So by putting that into dollars and cents, especially for your independent contractors, what they hear is they hear, oh crap, there's a liability risk if I don't have this on my record. Now, they may not drink from the whole well and go, well, I love this training, but they're going to do it. And they're going to protect themselves because it's all about, making sure that you're protected and making sure that you're taken care of. So we really highly promote covering yourself, protecting yourself, and making sure you got the best awareness you possibly can. And since we switched our orientation over and started using this platform, it definitely is started to spread more out throughout the organization. And it's so much easier now than it was before.
That's what I try and tell people is that initially there will be pushback, there will be challenges when you implement orientation for the first time because it's new. And not everyone embraces new things with the same willingness as others. But once it becomes a habit, safety can be habitual. Safe training, safe thinking, safe behavior, these are all things that can be driven home repeatedly to the point where it becomes automatic. It becomes the way that people perform. It becomes the expectation. And it sounds like you guys have definitely reached that part where it's just, this is how we operate, period. This is what we do. This is who we are. And that's great. That's powerful. That's the things that people can get behind. And I think you do a very good job setting the table with, this is the mission of why we're doing this. This is not just busy work. This is not just to check a box on an insurance application. This is, we want you to be safe in our vehicles. We want you to be safe for our clients, for our companies, for the general public. I think it's awesome that you're that upfront and forward about it. And this is our motivation comes from. And that's great. I love that. I love it. So
yeah, when you look them straight in the eye and you're giving them the reasons why you want them to do it, you can see it. And you ask them the question, do you understand where I'm coming from, with this? And do you understand what I'm saying and why I'm saying it? And when they're looking at you and they're saying, yeah, I get it, then, that's like that light bulb moment when it goes off over their head and you're like, yeah, there we go. Now we got it.
Excellent. Awesome. That's great. Now, I know the onboarding process here, I know this is a bit of a living, breathing organism here, and this does get updated periodically. So this is obviously not the same version that you and Leslie put together 2.5 years ago. It's been tweaked and prodded over time. Do you typically have a time frame that you and Leslie go and, maybe I'll ask Leslie about this. Leslie, is there typically a time you reach out to Paul about, hey, have we taken a look at this in a while? Does this need to be freshened up?
There's no real time frame on it, but at the beginning of the year, I had a conversation with him that we needed to revamp this and make some changes. So that's where all of this 30, 60 day and the beginning orientation and the specific training went out. And we just kind of separated it out and changed some groups up and revamped the whole program for him.
Awesome.
We just recently started doing this because of the feedback that we got. And I had this program and I hired a training manager on, and unfortunately we were all very overloaded. My team wasn't very big when I got here. It was just me and 2 people for 600 trucks. So I had to build out the team, and I hired a guy on, great education background, and he was doing hiring and training at the same time. And I was so busy doing safety that when I turned it over to him, he really, unfortunately, was, he was doing his best. And I think what happened was we just lost touch with it. And I lost touch with Leslie. I didn't realize the effect that it was going to have on the training program. My focus went away. And so we reconnected again. And when I did, it was kind of oh my gosh, where in the heck have you been? And I'm like, okay, so what's going on with the training program? And when we looked at it, we're like, okay. And that's when she said, you need to do some revamping. We need to do some work, get this thing organized, get it on track. We were doing online orientations, but it needed some defining, really some well-defining. And she helped us to basically get that defined. Once she and I started connecting again, I realized how much of an asset that I was basically ignoring. And I kicked my own butt for that one. Or she kicked my butt too, several times. She still does. She's like, you just dropped me like a hot potato, really? But next thing you know, we were on calls like collectively a whole day of time looking over this, and amazing how it came out and the effect that it's had. So I can't, thank her enough for being patient and waiting for me to get myself unbusy enough or pull my head out to get back on board.
That is a challenge. I mean, we know that you have many masters that you have to report to, and that the Infinity side is not always a number one on the radar, because you've got people pulling you 6 different directions at any given time. And I know it's a good thing that we have Leslie there to help back you up in a sense. And I know that when we've framed client success to other groups, we talk about them as being an extension of your company. It's basically an unpaid employee of Wayne, because her goal is to, and function is to act on your best behalf to make sure that you get what you need out of the system.
Yeah.
And for some folks, and like in this situation, it's a very close relationship that you all have. You talk frequently. I mean, Leslie, how often do you guys talk? Once a week at least?
Sometimes every day.
Sometimes every day. Okay. So
it may not be for very long, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
Excellent, excellent. So that is, I'm not going to say for everyone on this call that's listening that is the expectation that you must implement for yourself. It works great for Paul and Leslie, and if that works great for you, awesome. We have client success reps to help with that. But I think that communication is absolutely essential and frequent too, because I mean, the needs of the business can change dramatically. We can have instances of new clients that need additional training. I know with the coronavirus, we were generating content about that so that you all could implement that out to your drivers, because there was so much uncharted territory. How do you clean the cab of your truck if you can't use a vacuum? What substances can you use to clean fabric that don't damage them, and all sorts of other things? And you just can't go radio silent, I guess, for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, God forbid, that you're not engaged. So I think that's awesome. Leslie does keep me abreast of any kind of conversations that you guys have. So I know how frequently you guys talk. So
it's interesting because sometimes either I'll call her or she'll call me because there's just one thing that I need either an answer on. And I don't know, normally, an email works, but I just like to hear her voice, because usually what happens is I'm in one of them moods that something's going on, and she picks up the phone and it's, "Hello, sunshine." And I'm like, okay, I'm feeling better now. All right, so what's we got going on? And it takes very little time on the phone. And I know she's busy. If she can't pick up the phone, she calls me right back. I never worry about, oh crap, I got her voicemail. Because I know she's got a lot of clients she's taking care of. And it's not just the Paul show. It's not just me.
I know that with a 30-60 day in the orientation, that sets the table in a very good way for ongoing training from that point forward. I mean, they cannot go through your 60-day orientation and come back and go, well, I've never done that before, because they just got done doing it for 2 months. And the expectation you set with them that this is going to be their reality. So it dovetails very nicely into the ongoing training, which I know that you do with us, as well as the corrective action remedial piece that you take advantage of. But with the ongoing training, I mean, you do this monthly for your existing staff as well. And I know one of the questions that we typically get on these webinars is, how do you know what to choose when you're assigning monthly training, and how frequently? How did you decide on doing it monthly versus quarterly?
One of the things that you look at is you look at the engagement. If you spread it out too far, they lose that engagement. It's not as important. It's not part of their routine. It's not part of what they do. So the frequency is important, just basically because of freshness. As far as content goes, now the content, Infinity has just a huge catalog of courses to choose from. So if you can't find something to put out there, then you're just not really looking. But at the same time, you don't want to put something out there for winter driving when you're in the heat of summer. So you obviously are looking at what is relevant to the current situations, either within the fleet, the area. Sometimes we'll look at changing up a video for one side of the fleet versus another, because we have couple of southern terminals, and they'll get into summer faster than we will, and road construction faster than we will. So we may hit them with something a little bit sooner, just to bring that road construction awareness or school back in session awareness, things like that. We also look at what's going on within the safety feedback regarding safety awareness programs, whether it's speeding, whether it's following distance. If we start noticing some trends, we'll pump up the volume on the awareness of those topics. And it's amazing the effect that it has. You almost see an immediate nosedive in the frequency of incidents, after a training. And that's the purpose of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That means it's working.
Yeah. And when you can see that working, then you got that validation. And it also helps when you're trying to sell ownership on these types of things in these programs, is by being able to say, hey, well, look, we just pumped up this thing on speed awareness, and look at our speed scores, they dropped. Or, we talked about following distance, and the videos for following too closely dropped. So, obviously there's value there.
Sure.
So that's something that you have to be able to document and carry through. Yeah, one of the other things that's really interesting is you mentioned it, was the reoccurring or remedial training for, incidents or issues. And Leslie's all over me about that one. When I call her up and I say, "Oh, you wouldn't believe it, we had a crash this morning." We actually did have a crash this morning, by the way. Fortunately, no one was hurt. Simple, it cleaned it up and everyone went on their way. But, it's like, she'll be like, "Okay, so what training are we assigning?" She won't even wait for me to tell her. She's like, "Okay, who was it? What do we got to do? Let's get this taken care of. Get it taken care of, get it done." Yeah, she's on this before I even think it most of the time.
I know she's very forward thinking. Now, Leslie, when you're helping him plan out, because I know that you're always very good with suggestions of recurring training, what's your process? What are you thinking about before you talk to Paul about, hey, these are the items we should get on his radar that are going to be valuable?
I just try to think about what's trending, like, the roadside inspection things. And he was talking about driving through work zones because when, the weather gets nicer, winter weather, different things that are going around, for all drivers in the world. I just try to tailor it to that. And as far as his corrective action for violations, if he tells me what happens and I throw out there, okay, if you had someone that veered over into another lane and had an accident, we need some changing lanes, possibly turning if they're following too close, some tailgating, just throw some stuff out there like that.
Okay, awesome. We did have our marketing team, Paul, pull some screenshots from some of your custom content that you put together. This is something that you take very seriously and you do spend time with it. You're not necessarily shooting on 4K, 5K HD here to get across what you need, but I mean, there are things that are unique to Wayne that you need to train on, or things that your company, your trucks have that you want to focus on. And so you'll put a piece together, and you put custom pieces together fairly frequently. And I know that probably quite a few folks on this call may be scared to death about getting in front of a camera to put something like this together. When you were first starting with custom content, how did you take that leap? What did you tell yourself?
Well, I've got a bit of an advantage, Craig. It's kind of embarrassing, but I'm a ham. Okay, just ask my wife, ask anybody around me. I'm a ham, so I don't have a problem getting in front of people or talking. But for those who are a little less, shall we say, have that type of a tendency, and Leslie can attest to this, that I just talk too much.
He's right.
Yeah. So, my suggestion is, where I don't have a problem getting in front of the camera, I also did the ELD training that you see, that slide on the right there, ELD training assigning a vehicle. That one was 100% just voice over. And then I had my training manager that has a great background in doing video editing and working with pieces. And he did it just on his desktop. And he basically said, "Okay, well, what do you want to say?" All we did was we lined up the bullet points that we want, created more or less a talking paper, recorded the audio, and then put the pictures to match the audio. It was pretty simple to do. And then for those that are a little bit shy about having their face on there, it's just a voice.
True.
And
True.
we recorded that just off a little plug-in microphone off of my laptop in my office. I mean, we did the whole thing in my office. That one with the screen, that was our first ELD, and I did that. That's my screen in my office. I just had a video camera set up there and recorded it the whole time.
Excellent. Yeah, for those of you on the call that have some trepidation about the custom content piece, Paul made a great suggestion. It doesn't have to have your face on camera for it to be a custom content piece. We have instructions that we can provide folks on how to do a voiceover PowerPoint, basically animating a PowerPoint you put together that you narrate so that it comes across as a video that you can then assign out for custom training. So if you need those details, please, in the follow-up from the webinar, please let us know, because we can email those to you today so you can start that process. I think Paul will admit, once you start doing these, it gets easier with practice and frequency. That don't have to be Oscar worthy to be useful. As long as the information is valid and good, it's not just something that's being read to by someone on the screen. It should be engaging enough for your folks.
A lot of that engagement comes from the excitement within yourself for the subject. If you truly love what you do, I mean, I love my job. I love what I do. There's parts of it that are not as much fun, but I love what I do, and I love the drivers, and I love the process that I go through to get to through each one of those. So, talking about ELD training, some people find that absolutely horribly boring, or just mundane or talking about different subjects. But if you show your passion through your presentation and don't just read it, the engagement will immediately pick up because they'll hear it. You know, like you said, Greg, it doesn't have to be Oscar worthy, but put your heart into it and have fun with it. You know, your drivers and everybody else will appreciate that. You know, when you make it that way and personal, they know you.